Hi, guys, it's Dr. Sadaf, and I just wanted to give you an update as to what is going on. So, I have opened up my practice in Chappaqua, New York, and I'm currently accepting new patients. So, I want to invite you to come and become a patient of mine. If you've been listening to this podcast, you've been listening to the episodes, you are finding so much value in all of this. I want to invite you to become a patient of mine and come see the difference with a doctor that actually has time to listen to you and support you through the transitions that you may be experiencing, whether they're perimenopause, menopause, or you're experiencing any type of sexual dysfunction. And of course, I do annual GYN exams as well. So if you're not having any problems at all and you just need a regular exam done, I am more than happy to help you out. So make sure you check out the practice. It's called FemV Health, and the website for that is www.femvhealth.com. And make sure you look that up. The phone number for the practice is 914-538-2534. And make sure that you go and check it out. Check out the website and make sure you book your appointment today. Also, I have just started a new Facebook group. It's called It Might Be Menopause Support Group by Dr. Sadaf Lodi, FemV Health. And I'd love for you to come and join that Facebook group, because in that group, we'll be talking about different ways that you can get support and education as you go through this important transition in your life. It's also about building a community that is going through the same things that you are. Oftentimes we feel that when we go through things in our life that we are the only one, but I'm here to tell you that you are not alone, and that there are so many other women going through the same symptoms that you may be going through, whether it's hot flashes, night sweats, mood swings, vaginal dryness, pain with sex, brain fog, joint pain, dry eyes, any of those things, So come join us in that Facebook group. It's called It Might Be Menopause Support Group by Dr. Sadaf Lodi, and that's on Facebook. So come and join us in that community. And I definitely look forward to welcoming you there. And make sure that if you have any questions about any of the podcasts that I do, that you either DM me or email me, and I will create a podcast just for you, because you are a loyal listener and subscriber, and I would love to answer any and all of your questions. So if you have any burning questions that you are wondering about, please make sure that you email me at hello@femvhealth.com and let me know about your questions, or DM me on Instagram or TikTok, and I'll create an episode just for you. And as always, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. As you know, I am looking to get over 100,000 downloads by the end of this year, and I'd love for you to help me out in that endeavor. And so please share and like these podcasts, download them, and let all your family and friends know, because I know there is not much information out there, and some of the information out there is not actually factual. So you want to make sure that you are getting your medical information from a board certified OBGYN that knows and has studied all of this material, whether it's sexual medicine, perimenopause, or menopause. So looking forward to hearing from you. And now to the episode. I am an American board certified OBGYN, a mom, a Muslim, and I'm talking about sex. This is the Muslim Sex Podcast. Welcome to the Muslim Sex Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Sadaf Lodi, and this episode is everything you need to know about menopause and intimacy. It's a topic that we haven't really navigated before, so I'm really excited to delve into it and get going. Remember, as always, this is not meant to be any type of medical advice. If you have any questions about menopause, perimenopause, any of those things, make sure you check with your healthcare provider. And of course, as always, this is not any type of religious advice. So if you're having any questions about your religion, please speak with your friendly neighborhood religious leader. It is the Muslim Sex Podcast because I just happen to be a Muslim woman that talks about sex. So let's get into it. So the last couple of episodes that I've delved into Menopause 101 and kind of telling you about the hormonal changes that happen in a woman's body. And also, we have that decrease in estrogen and progesterone. And we also notice oftentimes we'll notice a decrease in testosterone as well. And with that decrease in testosterone, we know that women tend to experience a decreased libido. And oftentimes I'll get a patient that comes in, that's having all the symptoms of perimenopause, menopause. And, she'll mention that, oh, by the way, I don't have a sex drive and it's really causing a problem in my relationship and I'm not really sure what to do. So today we'll just talk a little bit about things that you can do to increase that intimacy in menopause, and see what happens. So let's talk about some of the emotional and psychological challenges that may occur in during this time, right? Some women are really concerned about their body and the changes that are happening. Some women are starting to notice that they're gaining more weight. And so they're having real issues with body image, right? So I saw something recently in the news and it was talking about the menopause makeover. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. And they were just saying he was a plastic surgeon out in LA. And he was talking about how a lot of women, there's no specific thing that he does for a menopausal woman as opposed to any other woman, but just that in this phase of a woman's life, she may be feeling a little bit more insecure. Maybe she's noticing, this uneven distribution of visceral fat, right? We talked about this, how estrogen really, prevents this redistribution of fat. So that, when we're taking estrogen, when we have estrogen in our body, we don't have this increased abdominal fat. Whereas when that estrogen goes down, we notice an increase in abdominal fat, the visceral fat. And so the procedure that this plastic surgeon does the most is, you guessed it, liposuction. He said that during, menopause, with all of the changes in the fat distribution that women experience, a lot of women come in specifically for liposuction to get rid of that weight gain that they've noted in their mid region. So I thought that was rather interesting. And of course, the usual like Botox and fillers and things like that he may do. But I thought it was interesting that he coined the term, menopause makeover, because we've heard of a mommy makeover that sometimes women will do after they're done having all their children, which includes like an abdominal plasty. It may include like implants, breast implants. But he was talking about menopause makeover. So anyways, so women may experience issues with their body image, of course, the increased stress and anxiety and some irritability that they may be feeling, depression. All of these things, right, are going to affect your relationship. So if you're feeling more anxious, if you're feeling irritable, you may end up like snapping at your partner for no particular reason. You may be very irritable at work. You may experience a lot of sadness or depression. Again, things that you never had before, all of a sudden now you're experiencing. And it's almost like somebody had said, it's almost like going through puberty a second time around. And I agree with that. There's so many changes that are happening in your body, and sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming. So, you may experience this sense of loss, right? I think some women may start to feel like, they're not feeling like themselves. And they may experience a sense of loss or even grieving that, this part of their life where they were, reproductive and able to conceive and all this stuff, if they wanted to, right? Not all women conceive, but if they wanted to, they had that option, that now they have lost that function, right? It just it's almost like, I personally think it's a privilege to get older, right? Because what is the other option? There is no other option. It's the fact that we're able to get older and go through these changes like perimenopause, menopause really is a gift. And that, I wish more people would embrace it as a gift. But some women see it as a loss. And it's funny because every time I'll talk to somebody and they'll be like, no, I'm not in menopause. I'm in perimenopause, right? As if like, when they go into menopause, they're just automatically, the image that comes up is that, an old woman that is no longer perhaps attractive, that's no longer useful to society, all of these kind of images and thoughts come up. And so I know that a lot of people shy away from saying that they're menopausal. So I want us to really embrace the fact that if we're able to go through perimenopause and menopause, that really is a gift and a privilege. And not everyone gets to go through that. And so, to really embrace it, own it, and really appreciate what your body is able to do. So as women navigate this new, phase in their life where they may be experiencing, this stress, this anxiety, this irritability, what I want you to notice is that, the mood swings are being caused by the fluctuations in estrogen. So estrogen levels fluctuate during a reproductive cycle and during perimenopause, right, as well. So these estrogen fluctuations increase new and recurrent bouts of depression. So, in fact, women are 1.5 to 3 times more likely than men to suffer from major depressive disorder. And this is due to the fact that most estrogen receptors in our brain are located in the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus. And those areas of the brain help us to process our emotions. And so if we're lacking the fuel that our brains use to help process those emotions, it can lead to those negative emotions that we start to experience with the anxiety, the depression, and the mood lability, right? We talked a little bit about this on the last episode, and I'm just gonna just mention it again for those of you that may have not listened to the last episode, or perhaps you forgot what I said. But just we know that the hippocampus is responsible for memory, learning, and emotion. And we know that it holds the short-term memories and transfers them to long-term storage in our brains. It also helps with emotional processing, including anxiety. The amygdala helps process emotions. So it also links emotions to memories, learning, and our senses. We know that the hypothalamus manages body temperature, hunger, thirst, mood, sex drive, blood pressure, and sleep. So, all of these regions in our brain are so important for so many different things. But specifically when it comes to perimenopause, menopause, it's important to note what an impact the lack of estrogen does have on our emotions, on our mood lability. And then when we are not feeling like ourselves, it can definitely affect our relationships as well. Now, the thing that most women will come to me for, and it's not really their moods or their irritability, they'll just think like, oh, this is just something that's happening. I'm not really sure why. They won't realize that it's probably due to perimenopause. But what they'll say is that they just don't have any libido, right? Like no libido at all. And they don't understand what's going on. And these could be women that perhaps had a high libido early on in their reproductive lives, and now as they go through perimenopause and menopause, they just don't feel the same anymore. And so the libido is impacted by the symptoms of menopause. Remember, the changes in body image combined with the psychological changes are all contributing to the lack of a sex life. And I think what's also important to understand is that you're having so many emotions, right? And when you're having all these emotions, you're not feeling like yourself, you don't know what's going on, and then you experience, decreased lubrication, pain with sex, all of these things together are going to really impact whether or not, you have a libido, right? Whether or not there's any desire there. And then if you're having all these issues, like, say that you're always anxious or worried or depressed, and, you're moody all the time, then that's definitely going to affect your relationship with your partner, right? And then they may be receiving at the receiving end of all of these labile emotions, and then they may get angry, right? And so you may have this conflict of not being able to see each other really for who you are. And also there might be, there may be a buildup of anger and resentment by the other partner, because if you always have a decreased libido every time they are trying to initiate some type of intimacy, then they may just get tired and fed up, right? And then you may get angry because, you may get angry at them because they're not able to understand you and see that you're having all these symptoms of perimenopause, and you're not able to put your finger on what exactly is going on. And then there's, lack of communication, all this stuff. So there may be a huge turning point in your relationship if you're not able to navigate these changes. The physical changes that I already mentioned, right? The pain with the sex, the decreased lubrication, all result in a low desire for sex. And this can lead to no connection with partners, resulting in, definitely relationship problems. Physiologically, it can also, what's happening is that you have a low testosterone, and that low testosterone leads to low libido, right? Also, if there's no progesterone, which is causing a loss of sleep, so you're not sleeping at night, right? And leaves a person exhausted. And if they're having hot flashes, and if you're having brain fog, and all of these things due to the low estrogen, that can also, right, cause a lot of issues in the relationship, because if you're always exhausted, if you're always tired, you're not going to want to add one more thing to your plate, right? So having intercourse at that point when you're already exhausted is just adding another chore to your list of chores that you have to do. And anytime something becomes a chore, it's not pleasurable, it's not something that you look forward to, and then of course you're going to want to avoid it, right? So these things are really important to understand. And that's why I spend a lot of time coaching my patients, because I want them to also understand what's happening during this phase in their life and why they may not be interested in sex, why they may have this low energy, this fatigue, all of this. It could be due to the low testosterone that you have in your body. And that could be leading to all those symptoms that you're experiencing. Another thing that I think is really, really important to understand, and I love this, and if you have not listened to my episode with Dr. Rosemary Basson on the human sexuality response, you are missing out. You definitely go back, take a listen. She is an amazing researcher and physician. She works out of British Columbia, and she talks about, and she honestly came up with this human sexuality response. And it wasn't until 2001 that she wrote this paper, but that we finally understood what exactly the human sexuality response was. Remember that the only thing that we knew about human sexuality, and that human sexuality was what Masters and Johnson gave us based on research in the 1960s on old white men. And then it wasn't until the 70s that Kaplan came in and they put in desire in this sexual response cycle. And then in 2001 is when we finally get a model that makes a lot more sense, right? We know that there are contributors to sexual problems. We know that there is this whole thing called the biopsychosocial model that we have to take into effect when we look at somebody's decreased libido and why they're not interested in having intercourse anymore. Say that they had a normal libido before, but now it's just completely gone. We have to take a look at all these other factors. Okay. So let's get a little bit into what exactly this is. So when, somebody comes in to me and is talking about low libido, there's so many things that I have to go into in terms of evaluating them. And the important thing to note is that, as a sex med doc, you always take into account their biopsychosocial aspect of that person's life, right? So the biological component is going to be, I'm going to take a look at their anatomy. I'm going to make sure that they don't have any chronic infections, that they're not having pain with insertion, that their pelvic floor muscles are not too tight, all of those things, right? I'm going to take a look at that anatomical portion of it. The psychological component, I'm going to see if they're experiencing new onset anxiety, depression, any of those things that could be affecting how they're feeling about themselves, about their partner, all those things. And then the social aspect of it is going to be, what type of community were they raised in? Was it an ultra conservative community that regarded sex as something that was shameful, dirty, wrong? That you never talked about, that you never, learned about? Or did they experience some, female genital mutilation, right? So that they feel like they're broken, that they can't experience any type of pleasure. Those kind of things are going to be really important. Also, are they a single mom working like multiple jobs, just trying to make ends meet, right? So, they've got so many things on their plate, and now sex is just another thing on their plate, right? Is that something? Or are they taking medications that are decreasing their libido? We know that antidepressants can affect libido. We know that birth control pills can affect libido, right? What other calcium channel blockers? What other medications are they taking that could be affecting their libido, such that they're just not interested anymore in their partner? So all of those things are really, really important. And that's why when patients come to me and they ask me for a quick fix for their libido, I tell them, this is a long discussion. This is like a discussion that could take about a half hour to an hour long. There's no quick, there are pills. There's one pill that is FDA approved for a decrease in libido. There is an injection that you can take for a decreased libido. And then, of course, there's testosterone. Those are the only three things that we have for decreased libido. So there isn't like a quick fix. There's a whole psychological component, and the ideal triad for anybody doing sex med is to have a pelvic floor therapist, to have a sex med doc, and then also to have a sex therapist or provide some type of sex coaching so that a patient can then move forward in their relationship. And I think that that is really, really important. But let's talk a little bit about this human sexual response cycle, right? So what Rosemary Basson says, and it applies. So don't think that this doesn't apply to a woman that is in menopause. Of course, this applies. It's all the same. It doesn't matter if she's in her reproductive years, if she's not. The human sexual response cycle is based on, is a psychological, basically like a psychological circular response cycle that happens in the brain, because we know in the brain is the biggest sexual organ. And so if the brain is not receptive to sexual stimuli, it doesn't matter what's happening. That person is just not going to want any type of intimacy. So what we notice is that a lot of relationships require emotional intimacy. And that emotional intimacy and physical satisfaction is what leads to a person being receptive to some type of sexual stimuli that comes about to them. Or so like it could be like reading an erotic novel. It could be maybe their partner is trying to make some physical advances on them, or with them, and or it could be just being open to the idea of being physically intimate with your partner, right? So you have to have that safety, that emotional connection, that physical satisfaction that you are getting with your partner, right? And that emotional intimacy is also about being vulnerable with your partner so that you are receptive to some type of sexual stimuli. And that once you are receptive to sexual stimuli, you'll be more amenable, right? So if that opportunity comes about, you'll be ready for it. You're mentally ready for that. And then that will allow you to become aroused and experience that desire. And, there was a question once of what comes first, arousal or desire? And it doesn't really matter, that oftentimes it can be the arousal that happens first. And then as you're getting more into that physical connection, then that desire follows. And that's what's important about this female, or, we called it the female sexual response cycle, but Rosemary Basson calls it the human sexual response cycle. And what she says is that oftentimes arousal will happen before even the desire comes about. So you'll see arousal, then you'll have arousal and desire. And then, you will have that connection between that part, the two people, the individuals that are engaging in this type of physical intimacy. And then when they're allowed to be vulnerable with each other, then they will experience that emotional and physical satisfaction. And then, of course, that emotional intimacy is going to make them, again, receptive to a sexual stimuli that comes about. So that's why it's a circular model. Now, the things that will influence this being receptive to sexual stimuli is going to be all of those things that I mentioned before, that biological, that psychological, that social, those social things, right? Those three things, those three aspects of a person's life life will impact whether or not they are receptive to a sexual stimuli coming their way, and whether or not they will become aroused and have that desire to then continue in that physical intimacy. So, all that, going over all of that was super important, because when we think about menopause, right? Oftentimes people will tell me, my patients will tell me, oh, sex, oh, I gave that up, as if it's like smoking or something, like, oh, yeah, I gave that up years ago. No, if you are physically intimate and you enjoy that physical intimacy that you have with your partner, there's no reason to give it up in menopause, right? That's why I say that menopause does not equal abstinence, because it really doesn't. You have to just know that, there are things that happen, there are changes that occur as we go through this perimenopause, menopause transition, but that we have treatments for that, right? We have estrogen, we have vaginal estrogen, we have other modalities. There are lubricants, there are moisturizers that you can use. So, there is hope, there is treatment for, any type of genital urinary syndrome that you may be experiencing during perimenopause, menopause. And because you're experiencing it doesn't mean that your sexual life has to end. It just means that you just have to treat whatever is going on. And that's what's really important. Also, I want to say that, so much of the cognitive things that happen to us during this perimenopause, menopause phase with this, mood changes, the irritability, the anxiety, the depression, all of that is going to affect our libido. So really important to treat our mental health, because if we know that the brain is the biggest sexual organ, and if our brain, if we're not feeling like ourselves, and if our brain is experiencing so many negative emotions, then that really needs to be taken care of first before we can become intimate with our partner. Because what's going to happen is that, if you start becoming intimate with your partner and all of these other things are not dealt with, it's going to almost feel like an out-of-body experience, and you're going to be spectating. You're going to be watching yourself being intimate with your partner, but you're not really going to be present. You're not going to be there. So that's why this is super important to deal with, your mental health and the changes that occur in perimenopause, menopause, so that you can be fully present with your partner and experience all the emotions and the senses and the sensations that you're having when you have that physical intimacy with your partner. A few things that I really, really like, and I love these authors and their work that they've done, is Dr. Lori Brotto, Linda Weiner, and Rosemary Basson. Linda Weiner talks about sensate focus, which, again, if you haven't listened to my podcast on that, please do. Linda Weiner was on it, but also I talk about sensate focus and how just an amazing modality, especially for those individuals that have experienced trauma, abuse, or are new to intercourse and really are exploring for themselves. Really important to listen to Sensei Focus. Lori Brotto, she was on my podcast. She talked about mindfulness and Better Sex Through Mindfulness. That's actually her book. And I think that incorporating those modalities, especially when we're going through menopause, perimenopause, and being more mindful during our physical intimacy, will really help to just really make the encounter more rich and fruitful for both you and your partner, because you'll really be present. And we know that there have been studies that have been done that noted that when women were more mindful during physical intimacy, it increased libido, it increased desire, it increased lubrication, right? And they had more satisfying sexual encounters. So really important to see kind of what's going on in your head, and then to get the proper help that you need to move forward in your relationship. So really important. And, I spent a lot of time on that, but that's because that is super, super important. And some of the things really quickly that I do want to bring up is that some ways to improve your relationship during this time is by accepting and embracing changes in your body through positive body affirmations, and continue to educate yourself about menopause. There's something called sexual intelligence, which is basically that sex and intimacy evolve as we get older. And that's a term that was coined by an author. His name is Marty Klein. And he said that these experiences are not necessarily worse, but just different. And accepting that as we get older, our bodies are going to change, but that's just really a gift. As our bodies change, we are able to get older and experience the changes. Menopause and sexual abstinence, is like sexual abstinence. You don't have to be abstinent if you don't want to be in menopause. That's not like, a prerequisite for menopause is that you have to be abstinent. It's not the case. So, really think about what you want in your relationship. It's a choice. And about a third of long-term couples don't have sex or have sex only occasionally, but they don't necessarily consider that a problem. And it's just where their relationships have evolved. So, and that could be where your relationship is, right? You just don't want it. You don't need it. That's something that's not important to you. And that's totally fine. You can do other things that bring you closer, that create that emotional intimacy with your partner, like cuddling, sharing a kiss, a laugh, experiences, all of those things that can create that intimacy in your relationship. So, physical intimacy isn't always the be all end all for people. It's whatever you want and whatever works for you in your relationship. And just be aware that, what feels good can change. Women often quit being sexual when getting aroused or having an orgasm becomes difficult. But what can help is more mental engagement and physical stimulation. So as we age, blood fills the genitals more slowly, and that's where the estrogen comes in. That's why estrogen can help with lubrication. So, more slowly. And so when you become aroused, you may not experience the same type of sensitivity, and that reaching orgasm takes longer. So typically you'll need more direct and intense stimulation of your clitoris. So doing things like rubbing and touching instead of intercourse may be what you like best at this stage of life, right? And that's okay. You just have to let go of what you think what everybody else is doing. Just remember that it's about you and your partner and what you enjoy that matters. Communicating with your partner is really the key in setting realistic expectations about what you can do sexually and achieve intimacy as you age. So, living an overall healthy life, having good energy, getting enough sleep, being physically active, and eating well will go a long way in helping you focus on feeling good and also being intimate and sexual. So, really, really important. And well, it has been real and really intimate, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Muslim Sex Podcast as much as I did bringing it to you, because this is something that we don't really talk about, but I think it's something that we should talk about, and that is how we can promote physical and emotional connections as we go through different stages in our life, whether it's perimenopause, menopause, or postmenopause. Really important to keep that communication open with your partner. Let them know what you're feeling, let them know what you're going through, so they know how they can best support you in this transition. And well, we are done here, and it's been real and really intimate. And until next time, this is the Muslim Sex Podcast. So thank you for listening to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a review, share and like the podcast. And if you leave me a review, I'd love to shout you out on social media. So be sure that you share it with all your friends. And thanks for listening.